The Young and the Restless spoilers Fridays full August 22, 2025. Genoa City rarely moves in a straight line, it rushes forward in spirals of ambition and longing, then doubles back to the same crossroads with different faces and higher stakes, and this week the spirals tighten around 3 pressure points at once. Daniel Romalotti teeters on the edge of a creative rebirth he didn't see coming until Tessa Porter put it in his hands. Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra march into a public duel with Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson as if the jazz club were a courtroom and a trading floor combined, and far from the spotlight a persistent new interrogator named Holden Novak angles a deceptively polite question at Claire Grace that could blow open a scandal still humming just beneath the skin of the Abbotts and Newmans. The town hums with that prickling static that precedes a storm. Everyone swears they're ready for it. No one is. Sally Spectra's confidence arrives before she does. It's in the cadence of her messages, the haste of signatures, the way she tells Billy Abbott that Abbott Communications will be ready next week as if next week were an inevitability and not a cliff edge with wind screaming up from the gorge. Billy asks the right question, "Are you sure?" Not because he doubts Sally's vision but because he has learned the hard way that launch dates are illusions unless the people behind them are welded together by pressure and principle. Sally does not blink. She has her weapon, she says, and the word is chosen carefully. This is a war of attention, of distribution, of who gets to set the narrative for Genoa City's titans, and her weapon is a chief operating officer who knows how to turn chaos into leverage. Audra Charles. The name lands like a glass on mahogany, beautiful, resonant, carrying the memory of every drink poured before it. Billy's instincts flare. He remembers Audra's velocity, the way she can map incentives in a room and talk 3 people into 3 different truths without breaking eye contact. Can she be trusted? Sally meets the question with an answer that sounds like a vow: Audra will be loyal. It isn't naivety, it's strategy. With a fledgling media house strapped to a jet engine, Sally would rather tame a thoroughbred than prod a plow horse, and Audra, imperfect, brilliant, hungry, is bred for the sprint from launch to relevance. Sally's calculus is blunt: if you want to move fast in Genoa City, you hire someone who has already broken a few speed limits. Risk and reward are the same road. On the other side of town, a different calculation is in progress at the jazz club, where Chelsea Lawson traces the perimeter of a problem Adam Newman has already sketched in ink. Newman Media's expose on Kane Ashby landed with the percussive thud they expected, but the silence that follows isn't relief, it's the breath before a reply. Chelsea asks why Kane has said nothing, done nothing, posted nothing, and Adam answers with the cynicism of a man who has seen enemies play dead only to spring with sharper teeth. Kane is not paralyzed, he is positioning. He is consolidating allies, pricing loyalty, charting who flinched when the piece dropped and who amplified it without prompting. Adam's warning is specific: a family initiative to cozy up to Kane is not hedge but hazard. If Kane is quiet, it is because someone is talking to him in a channel not visible to the rest of them, and the instant you call that détente, he calls it reconnaissance. Adam understands the rhythm of counters because he has lived by them. You do not feed a shark to prove it won't bite. You stay out of the water or you bring a bigger boat. The bigger boat arrives, uninvited and smiling. Billy and Sally walk into the jazz club like a headline and a subhead, every eye pivoting before they even reach the table where Adam and Chelsea have been diagramming risk. Sally speaks first, a velvet scold, telling them she is disappointed in the cheap shot they took at Billy, because say what you will about his gambles, there is a difference between a man learning how to steer a company and a narrative crafted to make him look like he cannot find the wheel. Billy does not need defending, but he understands the optics of letting Sally plant the flag. If Abbott Communications is going to roar, it must do it in the voice of its chief executive from day one. He announces, not brashly but with the finality of a chess player snapping down a piece, that Sally will take the reins. He has plans of his own, he says, and even the way he says plans sounds like factories lighting up and editorial calendars stretching past the new year. Adam rolls his eyes because he knows performance when he sees it and respects it less when it is effective, but the gesture does not dilute the fact that for the first time in a very long time, The Abbotts are not merely reacting to a media punch, they are throwing one. Chelsea's gaze flicks between the four of them, noting that the line in the sand is not about content but control. Who tells the story of Kane, of Newman, of Abbott, of Genoa City itself will dictate which brands rise and which reputations rot. The jazz club is supposed to be a refuge for music and memory. Tonight it is an exchange where futures are traded in glances. While the Titans posture, Daniel Romalotti stares at a different kind of future laid out on a laptop screen that Tessa Porter slides across a cafe table. He had expected a coffee and a check-in, the kind of gentle conversation artists grant each other when deadlines have exhausted vocabulary, but Tessa does not arrive with sympathy. She arrives with a deck, a demo, a clearance memo, and a promise. The surprise is not that she wants to collaborate. Daniel's art has been ripening again, lines and color returning to his hands with a steadiness that makes him almost superstitious. The surprise is the architecture of what she is proposing. A multimedia cycle that treats Genoa City's past as a living score, interactive art from Daniel, a suite of original songs from Tessa recorded in stripped acoustic and full studio variants, a pop-up gallery experience threaded through with audio triggers and long-form interviews from the city's most guarded voices, built to tour in 3 cities with a companion digital release that can be sampled in-game and streamed across platforms. Tessa has already negotiated provisional distribution with a boutique label hungry for prestige. She has the lawyer's red lines, the slots at 2 summer festivals, the legal language to shield Daniel's IP after the Omega Sphere saga taught him exactly how fast a passion project can be ripped from its creator when he isn't looking. Daniel expected a pep talk. He got an engine. He is stunned into stillness not because he doubts the scope but because he recognizes he has run out of excuses to delay the next chapter. Tessa's timing is surgical. She knows his reluctance is less about the work and more about the fear that when he steps back into the arena, he will be greeted by ghosts rather than applause. Her surprise is an exorcism disguised as an opportunity, and as he scrolls through budgets and creative briefs, he realizes she has thought of Lucy's schedule, of Heather's guardrails, of how to keep the collaboration from scraping against old wounds. The last page is not a contract, it is a question written in Tessa's careful hand. Are you ready to let the work be louder than the past? And Daniel feels something unknit and then reweave stronger. At the quiet edge of Chancellor Park, where confessions tend to feel less like evidence and more like weather, Holden Novak asks Claire Grace a question that pretends to be casual and is anything but. Holden is the kind of journalist who looks like a friend until his third follow-up. Podcasts taught him how to sound like a confidant, and long-form features taught him how to carry a silence until the other person fills it. He has come to town with the bland cover of a multimedia project on Midwestern dynasties and the true intent of mapping the fault lines in the Abbott-Newman topography as leverage for a book that could buy him a decade of freedom. He asks Claire about Kyle Abbott not as a lover but as a timeline, and it takes 1.5 sentences before Claire's posture gives away that she understands there are subplots inside the question. What did they promise each other when they thought no one was watching? How serious did things get before the whispers about parentage grew too loud to ignore? And what does it mean for the Abbotts if the rumors Jill planted in the city's bloodstream calcify into truth? Claire answers with the poise of someone who has practiced both contrition and composure. She says that Kyle is an important friend, that they care about each other, that the rumors are cruel because they reduce human beings to puzzles. Holden smiles like a man who has just found a corner piece. He asks if she has taken a DNA test with Jack. Claire says the only sane thing left to say, that nothing should be decided until the facts are facts. He thanks her, but in his notebook the sentence he writes is not a quote, it is a question mark pressed so hard it dents the page. Kane Ashby's name returns to the evening like a chorus, at first as a warning in Adam's voice and then as a theory Chelsea articulates from a different angle. If Kane is silent, perhaps it is because he believes time will do his work for him. Newman Media burns hot and fast, and the public's appetite for outrage is bottomless but shallow. Wait a few cycles and the headline becomes sediment. But Chelsea also knows Kane is a pragmatist when panic looks too much like weakness. The Married to Danger alliance he has recently been flirting with, Phyllis Summers, incandescent and unpredictable. Suggests a countermove will arrive not as a rebuttal op-ed but as a market maneuver disguised as philanthropy or a leak seeded where it will metastasize fastest. Adam listens, face unreadable, and toggles between two tactical trees, one where they keep pressure on Kane's flank, another where they prepare the corporate immune system for a disinformation fever. He hates that both trees include human fallout he cannot fully control. He hates it more that the person most likely to inject gasoline into any fire with a smile is someone who once knew his soft spots by touch. By the time Billy and Sally finish their pass through the jazz club, the room's mood has veered from bemused to adrenalized. Sally's disappointment in Adam and Chelsea for underestimating Billy is not merely theater, it is the preface to a doctrine. Abbott Communications will not be a vanity imprint. It will be a fulcrum. Their slate is not gossip dressed up as gravitas, it is investigative work filtered through editorial sensibility and a branded studio arm designed to turn long reads into revenue. Sally talks about tone with a designer's eye. The pieces will be sharp and saturated, never hysterical, built to travel. Billy lets her pace out front and watches the tables they pass. In 3 minutes you can tell who wants to be courted and who is already dialing a friend at Newman to say that Abbott Comms is for real. Adam's eye roll is still in the air when his phone vibrates with an alert from a private monitoring stack flagging a cluster of newly registered domains and social handles that look like grassroots fan accounts but share two metadata tells he has seen before in campaigns financed through intermediaries. There is no proof they are Kane adjacent. There is no evidence they are designed to swarm a narrative. There is only the stutter of pattern recognition in a brain trained by years of proxy wars. He pockets the phone without comment. There are some advantages to playing a longer game. You get to decide when to pretend you didn't see what you already cataloged. Sally returns to the table in time to receive a text from Audra that reads like a drumbeat. Vendor onboarding complete. Draft editorial calendar synced. Pilot crew hired. The tempo of competence is intoxicating and dangerous, because it sings a lullaby that makes you forget the cost of trusting a fixer whose favorite tool is leverage. Audra, to her credit, is doing exactly what Sally hired her to do, build the machine in a week that most companies need a quarter to assemble. What Sally does not know yet is that Audra has also taken a meeting in a shadowed corner with a man who never introduces himself twice and who slides across an envelope with a list of freelance writers whose bylines can be rented if you know which debts to call in. Audra does not promise him anything. She lets him believe she did. Loyalty, she would argue if asked, is not a feeling, it is a function of aligned outcomes. As long as Sally's outcomes stay aligned with Audra's, the company hums. If they diverge, Audra has built herself a neutral zone to stand in while she chooses. It is not betrayal. It is contingency. Daniel and Tessa spend an hour moving pieces across paper until the proposal stops feeling like a dare and starts feeling like a blueprint. Tessa's surprise is layered. She didn't just bring distribution and venues, she brought collaborators who could refract Daniel's work through forms he hasn't touched since before the ugliest part of his last collapse. A cellist with a taste for dissonance who wants to score live to Daniel's projections. A documentary sound designer who can turn a gallery into a breathing instrument. A legal clause that protects the work even if one partner needs to step back midstream, a grace built from lessons they both paid for with reputation and sleep. When Daniel finally looks up, the cafe has changed light. He realizes what Tessa actually handed him is not a project but a spine. The kidnapping aftermath that rewired the family's reflexes, the public messes that taught him where to place his words and where to swallow them. None of it has to be the last footnote of this decade. He tells Tessa he will do it, and in that sentence there is a small, precise mercy neither of them name. He is choosing art over anxiety. For a Romalotti, that is revolution. Holden Novak's question keeps echoing long after he closes his notebook. Claire hears it when the park is quietest, the way it threaded Kyle's name into a tapestry of rumors about fathers and daughters and the risk of loving anyone before the ink on a DNA result dries. Jill's careful balm of suspicion has seeded the ground, And while Claire refuses to be defined by conjecture, she cannot pretend that the fear she tasted, sharp, metallic, when Holden leaned on the words "Are you certain?" will fade easily. She texts Kyle something simple and true: "We need to talk when the launch noise dies down." He answers with a heart and a promise. He is loyal, which only sharpens the edges of what might happen if science confirms the worst version of their story. Claire, who has rebuilt herself from Jordan's programming one honest choice at a time, vows not to let a stranger's notebook dictate her next chapter. But she also knows that in Genoa City, history has a way of writing itself in the margins while you are busy coloring in the main picture. Night folds over the jazz club and the cafe and the park, and the three threads begin to braid. Adam's alert blossoms into a map of ghost accounts warming up around keywords that intersect Newman, Abbott, and the newly minted Abbott Communications, an ecosystem that looks organic until you watch it from far enough above to see the rhythm of coordination. He doesn't call it Kane. He doesn't need to. Chelsea reads his expression and says aloud what he chooses not to: a counter is coming. Across town, Sally clinks a glass with Billy and confesses, in the private grammar of partners who have already survived one fire, that she is simultaneously terrified and thrilled. Terror means the work matters, thrill means she is still the woman who builds anyway. Audra's calendar pings 7 a.m. editorial stand-up with a 3-line agenda built like a blade. Daniel emails Tessa the only 4 words that matter: "Let's make it sing," and then opens a blank canvas that is suddenly less blank than it has been in years. Holden trims his transcript of Claire down to its most careful sentences and drafts a teaser that he knows will nudge the city without fully waking it. Claire stands at a mirror and does not practice answers, she practices breathing. And somewhere in the quiet slice between midnight and morning, a courier drops a manila envelope at a desk where it will be found by a person who still thinks they are a spectator. Inside are screenshots of internal Newman media planning, a list of Abbott Communications contractors with 3 names circled, and a short note written in a hand that enjoys its own elegance. You are not the only one who knows how to set a narrative. There is no signature. There doesn't have to be. The town already knows the chorus of suspects by heart: Kane with his newfound preference for silence as strategy, Phyllis with her talent for turning a grudge into a business model, an ally we have not met yet who believes chaos is simply a more honest form of competition. By dawn, Genoa City has made a dozen new promises to itself. Sally will launch on time because not launching would be a different kind of death. Billy will let her lead and will find out whether the plans he kept close are still plans or just a posture he needed at a table with Adam Newman. Adam will prepare both trees and wait to see which forest catches fire first. Chelsea will sketch a third option where their family refuses to be baited into an expensive feud and instead builds something that survives the cycle. Daniel will choose a line and draw it, and Tessa will bring in a chord that makes his color hum. Holden will keep asking questions, and Claire will keep answering only to the ones that are facts. And beneath all of it, the current that never goes away: every launch is a confession, every silence a tactic, every toast a test. Abbott Communications will try to own the story. Newman Media will try to own the horizon. Kane Ashby will time his reply for maximum bruise. And the tiniest of hinges, one question in a park about a young woman's connection to a family that never stops paying for its name, might swing open a door that none of them can close again. If the city is lucky, its next week will merely be loud. If it is honest, it will admit that luck has never been its true currency, obsession is. Sally is obsessed with building. Billy is obsessed with proving he is more than his worst headline. Adam is obsessed with not being caught off balance by a man like Kane ever again. Chelsea is obsessed with turning harm into art and art into armor. Daniel is obsessed with finally letting the work forgive him. Tessa is obsessed with giving the work a world. Holden is obsessed with the elegance of a question mark. And Claire, caught in the crosswinds of affection, rumor, and a science that does not care about feelings, is obsessed with the one thing Genoa City rarely grants without a price: a future that belongs to her. Society was loud in the friendly way that made secrets feel smaller, a Friday night hum under the glass chandeliers where laughter could be an alibi and soft jazz could drown a confession if you timed it right. Holden Novak chose this room on purpose. He liked his stories to begin where people felt safest. He leaned in at the round table, warming the air with a harmless anecdote about Los Angeles, the kind of humiliating origin story the best reporters hoard because it proves they remember what it feels like to be on the wrong end of power. He painted the scene with quick strokes: a desperate first month in the city, a casting call for a reality dating show pitched like a fairy tale with craft services, a whirlwind match with a woman he later learned was one of the show's decision-makers, and then the kind of cowardice that comes dressed as ambition. He ghosted her, and found out the hard way that in a town built on gatekeeping, you don't burn the hand that stamps the pass. So of course, he finished, shrugging with a self-aware wince, I didn't get the part. Didn't even get the consolation montage. A lesson in what not to do, brought to you by 23-year-old me. Daniel barked out a laugh first because he recognized contrition when he heard it. Tessa laughed because the timing was impeccable, and even Claire found herself laughing, quick and clean, in that narrow little space where embarrassment redeems itself by becoming funny. For a moment the table belonged to the version of the evening they'd planned: no headlines, no ghosts, just a little oxygen. The door opened and the oxygen changed shape. Nate Hastings stepped inside with Audra Charles on his right, cool and immaculate, a woman who could turn a foyer into a chessboard before she reached the host stand. The room did what rooms did when her name appeared in a sentence with COO and launch next week: it watched. Claire's laughter died in her throat so fast it felt like a bruise. She told Holden, too brightly, that she had been feeling lighter lately, that the city's noise had softened in her chest. Then her eyes cut to the woman at Nate's shoulder and the old weight returned with surprising precision. Until Audra walked in, she added, and the joke didn't land because it wasn't one. Nate, for his part, clocked the table in a scan: Daniel, whose jaw always telegraphed tension when family was in the room; Tessa, who could cool a confrontation with an octave; Holden, whose face was friendly and whose notebook was never as far away as you thought; and Claire, who had rebuilt poise like a muscle, who was either steady or holding it with white knuckles. He told Audra he wanted to say hello. Audra nodded the way executives nod at pleasantries they'll later categorize. Nate approached and asked the only question that mattered after the past season of injuries, revelations, and surgeries: how are you? Claire said she was fine, because the truth was impolite. Tessa, gracious to a fault, offered condolences for Nate's brother, and the table followed, the way good people do when grief steps into a sentence. Nate accepted, grateful without wanting to stay in that gravity too long, and drifted to the bar to get drinks, a small retreat that created a vacuum exactly wide enough to swallow all their better instincts. Claire sat down and glared at Audra as if posture were a warning shot. Tessa watched the geometry of it, the set of Claire's shoulders, the way her hand tightened around the base of her water glass, then asked, softly, what's wrong? Claire answered in a voice warm with the kind of calm that precedes thunder. I hope you don't mind if I make a scene, she said, a wryness that didn't quite hide the resolve. Because I'm done pretending that woman doesn't exist. And before anyone could say her name in caution or comfort, Claire stood, crossed the space to the bar where Nate waited for the bartender to set down 2 tumblers, and spoke in a register that cut through the brass and chatter without ever rising to a shout. There's something you need to know, she said. Audra turned, slow and smooth, as if she'd heard the line in rehearsal. It's about your girlfriend. She let the syllables travel, watched the moment land in the room's bones. She made a deal with my grandfather to bankroll her company, Claire continued, in exchange for Kyle cheating on me, with her. Nate did the sensible thing a surgeon does when faced with an unanticipated complication. He separated the blood from the noise. He looked at Audra. Is that true? Audra didn't blink, because blinking is for people and used to bright light. Of course not, she said, a denial like silk. It's a fiction Kyle engineered and then fed to his fragile little girlfriend when they needed a villain for their breakup. And by the way, the only reason my name is in their story is that Kyle tried to put it there in France. I said no. He sulked. End of chapter. If anyone's ego needed bubble wrap, it wasn't mine. She smiled without joy, then added for the audience she knew was forming, the idea that I need Victor Newman's money to do my job is insulting. The idea that I'd take it in exchange for a tryst. She let the sentence trail off like smoke, confident the unsaid carried the sting. Audra's talent had always been the ability to choose a version of the truth that made the rest of the truth look vulgar, to rearrange motive and sequence until the accusation seemed gauche just for being uttered in public. In a town that prizes performance, she was fluent. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was Claire, who had learned the hard way that politeness is a kind of currency abusers love to spend. She stood her ground, every inch of her radiating not hysteria but detail. "You don't get to call me fragile to dodge a yes or no," she said, and the steadiness in her voice made heads tilt at nearby tables. "My grandfather isn't a rumor. He's a man who pays for outcomes. He paid for yours." Audra's posture sharpened 1 degree. There was a line she would not let Claire draw in public, not without draining some of the ink from it. "Your grandfather is a man who thinks everyone is for sale," she replied. "But a presumption is not a receipt. If you have proof, show it. If you don't, stop using a family name as a cudgel." That word, proof, moved through Holden like an electric pulse. He didn't reach for his notebook. He watched Claire's face instead, because in a room where narrative is currency, the person who has the receipts learns to wait for the price they want. Nate exhaled, an edge creeping into his control. "Claire," he said, "if you know something I need to know, say it plainly. If this is about pain that Kyle caused, I'm sorry, I truly am, but weaponizing my relationship won't unring that bell." He didn't mean it as a rebuke. He meant it as a triage. Claire nodded once, a concession to his fairness. Then she reached into her bag, took out a phone that wasn't her primary, and slid it across the bar top with the kind of casual authority that comes from deciding you are done begging privately. "Our proof starts there," she said. "A message chain between Audra and a runner who works Victor's back channels, handles introductions, keeps hands clean. You'll see dates that precede the France narrative and bank markers that line up with the first 2 vendor payments for her COO rollout. There's more. I'm not naive. I didn't come tonight to guess." The bartender, sensing combustion, set the drinks down and took 3 careful steps away. Audra's eyes flicked to the device and back. She would not touch it, touching is a tell. "Screenshots are theater," she said evenly. "Metadata can be faked. Schedules can be retrofitted. I don't litigate my life on a stranger's phone, especially not one curated by a woman who learned how to alchemize victimhood into leverage in record time." Daniel had crossed the room by then, Tessa with him, not to form a phalanx around Claire but to change the geometry of the conversation before it hardened into spectacle. He put a hand on the bar, a small declaration that he would absorb some of the blast if one came. "Nate," he said, "let me get us a table in back. We can look at whatever Claire brought without giving half the city a front row seat." Nate appreciated the lifeline because he knew both the power of privacy and the cost of appearing to demand it. He nodded, clipped, and gestured for Claire to lead. Audra didn't move, then did, precisely a half-beat later than the rest, as if to signal that she followed no one. They took the corner banquette by the frosted glass, the one that had watched more deals and divorces than any boardroom, and for a moment the restaurant returned to its ordinary music while at the back of the room the 4 of them built a small courtroom out of a tabletop. Claire unlocked the phone, scrolled to a thread labeled with a name that meant nothing if you didn't spend time in Victor's shadow, and set the device between them. Holden hung back at the bar because journalists know when presence becomes interference. Besides, he could see what he needed from here, the faces, not the texts. Nate angled the phone, read a block of messages that were both banal and sinister, scheduling disguised as flirting, shorthand the city's fixers teach each other the way grandmothers pass down recipes. He didn't need dates to tell him whether the cadence was real. He could hear the melody of logistics, see the typos that only happen when you're rushing to confirm a meeting before a third party changes their mind. He tapped to the bank screenshots Claire said would be there, not because he believed screenshots but because his brain kept a clean ledger of what coincidence should look like, and this didn't. Vendor payments inside Abbott Communications arriving within 36 hours of a shell transfer from an entity that had no reason to fund Audra's ascent except that someone told it to. This proves nothing and suggests everything, he said finally, and the honesty of it felt like standing barefoot on tile. Audra smiled, tight. Exactly, she said. Which is another way of saying it proves nothing. Her contempt for ambiguity was sincere. Ambiguity had been useful when she wielded it and inconvenient when someone else did. Tessa, whose talent for cutting through to the human concern often saved people from the worst version of themselves, looked at Audra, not unkindly. If this is a misunderstanding, it can be cleared with daylight, she said. Open your books to Billy and Sally. Let a third-party auditor compare vendor flows to your personal accounts. If Victor's fingerprints aren't on anything, the rumor starves. It was the most reasonable sentence in the room, which made it the most dangerous, because reason demands a kind of vulnerability that power hates. Audra's eyes flicked, just once, at Daniel, as if calculating whether his recent commitments to transparency in his own creative life could be turned into a trap here. Then she shrugged, but the shrug didn't reach her neck. I don't restructure my privacy on the basis of an ex-girlfriend's paranoia, she said. And I don't hand trade secrets to a competitor because someone who can't let go of a breakup decides I'm the reason she's not engaged. The word engaged landed like a dropped fork. It wasn't just the insinuation. It was the reminder of how close Claire and Kyle had come to choosing a future before a paternity scandal pulled the rug from under the room. Claire's composure wavered, not at the jab but at the casual cruelty of weaponizing a wound she hadn't even mentioned. Daniel saw it, so did Nate. Enough, Nate said quietly, and the word carried a surgeon's authority. Audra, don't do that. It was small, but it was the first line he had drawn tonight that separated his partnership from his ethics, and in a town like this that line was a rare species. Audra blinked, once, slow, and recalibrated, because survival for her had never meant doubling down on a losing posture. Fine, she said. Here's my daylight. I'll let Abbott Communications General Counsel propose an auditor. I'll open whatever needs opening under NDA to any entity Sally and Billy select. And when I am clean, I expect a public correction from everyone at this table. She said it like a dare, which is how people say gracious things when cornered. Good, Claire said, and the word tasted like metal. But this isn't just about bank trails. It's about the fact that you weaponized me with my own family. You knew Victor wanted Kyle neutralized. You knew my relationship was a pressure point. You leaned on it. Audra didn't deny the psychology. Denying psychology is for amateurs. Your grandfather leaned on it, she answered. I don't help men make women smaller for sport. I help companies run. If a man with resources tests a weakness, that's on him. If a boyfriend betrays you, that's on him. Put the blame where it belongs. The elegance of the deflection would have impressed Claire in another life. Tonight it only made her want to walk until the city ran out of lights. From the bar, Holden watched Daniel angle his body to take heat that wasn't his, watched Tessa keep the conversation anchored to what could be verified, watched Nate balance self-respect with self-protection, watched Audra draw a circle around herself and call it professionalism, watched Claire refuse to let her pain be the punchline. He had come for color, he realized he had stumbled into structure. Whatever he wrote would not be about a salacious accusation. It would be about the mechanics of influence, how families outsource their will, how executives launder power through deliverables, how young women who survive manipulation must then survive the perception that their anger makes them unreliable narrators. He wouldn't publish any of it yet. Stories like this are like wine and evidence, you don't serve them before they're ready. The table broke with the uneasy politeness that follows a ceasefire. Nate paid for drinks he didn't touch. Audra accepted the audit terms with a nod crisp enough to slice paper. Daniel promised Claire he would walk her to her car and meant it. Tessa squeezed Claire's hand in a way that said, "I believe you even as the city insists belief must wait its turn." On the way out, Claire's phone lit up with a message she didn't want but expected, a one-line text from a number she'd once labeled "not now" and then deleted. "We should discuss how far you intend to drag the family into public mud." It didn't say a name. It didn't have to. Grandfathers prefer brevity. Back at the bar, Holden finally took out his notebook and wrote nothing down because the only line he trusted at that hour belonged in his head. In Genoa City, the truth rarely makes its entrance at the volume of a scream. It slips in at the volume of an audit. And at a round table in a crowded restaurant, four people who crave very different versions of peace agreed, almost accidentally, to let daylight do what drama never could decide. The air in society had already turned brittle after Claire's accusations, but what came next burned away the last of the politeness. With Nate still processing the tangled claims, Claire fixed her eyes on him and said the words that froze his glass mid-air. "Does that explain the kiss between you and her in New York?" The bluntness landed like a slap. Nate blinked, taken off guard, then leaned forward with a steadiness that only underscored his confusion. "Why am I only hearing about this now?" he asked, his voice carrying equal measures of disbelief and weariness. Claire didn't flinch. "Because I'm telling you the truth," she shot back. "Ask Kyle. Ask my grandfather. They'll confirm everything. Audra was willing to destroy my relationship with Kyle if it meant Victor would bankroll Vibrante." She let the words hang there, a gauntlet thrown not just at Audra but at Nate himself, daring him to choose whether to see the woman by his side as a partner or a threat. "That's who you're with," she added more softly, her voice edged with sorrow. "And you deserve better than that." With a flash of anger that betrayed the rawness beneath her poise, she brushed past Audra hard enough for the shoulder-to-shoulder contact to feel deliberate. Then she stormed out into the night. Holden Novak hesitated only a second before slipping after her, his notebook forgotten in favor of instinct. He caught up with Claire at the observation deck above Chancellor Park, where the city lights stretched out like a promise and a warning. She exhaled heavily, as though the skyline itself might steady her. "She's trying to distract me," Claire said, her voice low but laced with bitterness. "Trying to make me believe Kyle betrayed me when really, it was her cutting deals with my grandfather." The disgust in her tone was sharper than the chill in the air. Holden studied her carefully, then murmured, "That does sound like Audra. But let me plant a question in your mind, Claire, what if she isn't lying? What if Kyle isn't the man you think?" Claire turned to him sharply, the conflict plain in her eyes. "I love Kyle," she admitted, the words heavy as iron. "But I'd be lying if I said I don't have doubts. And I hate that. I hate that she's managed to make me question him." Holden nodded slowly, sensing the fracture lines. He didn't push. Sometimes all a reporter needed to do was water the seed and wait for the cracks to grow on their own. Meanwhile, back inside, another conversation shifted the evening's tenor. Tessa, sensing Daniel's tension after watching his mother's world tilt and Claire's drama explode, leaned close enough for her words to be intimate but not overheard. "Outside of my daughter," she said softly, "you're the only bright spot in my life. When I'm with you, Daniel, I actually believe I can be happy again. Thank you for that." For once, Daniel didn't deflect or couch his feelings in caution. He answered simply, "That's how I feel about you too." In a night clouded with lies and accusations, their exchange was a shard of pure truth, and they both knew it. Across the room, Nate had returned to Audra, his patience worn thin. She reached for his hand, her eyes pleading, and said, "Don't let Claire's lies poison what we have." But Nate shook his head slowly, exhaustion pressing into his features. "Tonight was supposed to be quiet," he confessed, voice low. "One of the worst nights of my life, and all I wanted was peace with the woman I care about. Instead, I've had to listen to accusations and evasions." Audra tried to draw him back in, whispering, "You know you trust me more than her." But Nate pulled his hand away, reminding her of the simple truth she couldn't dodge. "Since you came back from Nice, you've been murky." And tonight didn't help. Audra's smile flickered, that confident veneer straining under the first real crack. The war of words wasn't over. But for the first time, Nate's loyalty was no longer something she could take for granted.